So, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. We had a lot of requests. The New England Journal came out with an article a few months ago about a new weight loss drug. We've had a lot of requests to cover that. It's also a new diabetes drug. And now, wait a minute, which is it, weight loss or diabetes? Well, I mean, here's the thing. If you do what I do for a living, you know that managing diabetes is weight loss. No, the number one cause of diabetes is not overweight, obesity, body fat. That's the number two cause. But the number one cause is getting old, and you really can't change that piece. You can slow it down, but you can't change that. You can change body fat. And again, when you do what I do for a living, you see people all day, every day that have had oral glucose tolerance tests, insulin surveys. You know that just losing 10 pounds of body fat has more of a positive impact on glucose metabolism and insulin than anything else. So you might hear the question, you might ask, well, Doc, are you running a cardiovascular prevention clinic or are you running a weight loss clinic? I always saw it as running a cardiovascular prevention clinic, but here's the thing. I got to admit, I mean, weight loss is cardiovascular prevention. Another thing is going to come up, another reaction, and I've had this reaction how many times? I mean, Ken Berry left that on one of my comments. Ken Berry, the doc from Tennessee, he said, Doc, you talk about medications, lifestyle is king. I talk about lifestyle. Lifestyle is king. You can't, if I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. You can't out-prescribe a lifestyle issue. But I've also covered the fact that there are times and places where the science is really clear. Medications can help. In a like fashion, you can't out-supplement a lifestyle problem, but there are times when a supplement can help. In addition, exercise is not, you can't outrun a diet. But yes, exercise can help. So again, got a lot of attention about this drug. Most of you have probably already heard about it, tirzepatide or Mounjaro. I've had several patients request it, and we're going to talk about it today. For those of you who have not joined the channel before, we're all about heart attack and stroke prevention. Heart attacks and strokes, cardiovascular disease, it is the number one killer and disabler in our world today. And what's unfortunate is that the vast majority of the docs, about 2/3, according to the science, really don't know how to diagnose the most common, the most important underlying root cause, prediabetes. Again, that's not just my opinion, that's the science saying that. So the leaders, the guys that the guys and gals that are supposed to be helping us out of this problem don't know how to manage it either. So if you're going to take care of yourself, if you're going to prevent heart attack, prevent stroke, prevent kidney disease, blindness, dementia, you got to learn some things for yourself. And that's what this channel is all about, helping you understand how to extend a healthy life for you and those you love. So we'll cover topics like this. Previous topics we've covered, the worst ingredient for your immune system. I'll give you, that sounds like a teaser, and it is. I'll give you the answer. It's carbohydrates. They looked at the immune system of people that were going through cytokine storm, COVID-related issues, high blood sugar, and carbohydrate ingestion were the major killers. It messed up the immune system. This was a study. It's not something, it's not an editorial from me. It's a study that we covered in the Science. Long COVID, it was more than just a flu. Also, more studies talking about exactly how long COVID is working. And, you know, there's nothing better. We're all about the science and covering the science, the evidence that's out there about heart attack and stroke prevention. But there's nothing better than taking a break from that and hearing what a real patient has to say. Somebody who's been on that hero's journey, who's dealt with that issue, not just somebody who's a doc who's given you opinions or spouting science. And that was Lois. So we've got a couple of other good patient visits coming up soon. I'll tell you about those when we get there a little bit later. Now, as we talked about it, you have to learn some basics on how to prevent heart attack and stroke with your own, with yourself and your loved ones. That's what we have developed content, 3 courses that are about 2 hours each. If you can't get them for free, call Michelle at 859-721-1414, and she can figure out how to help you get those for free. That's basically just so you'll know and understand how to prevent your own problems with cardiovascular disease. We have content in several places. We've got YouTube memberships now. If you're interested in that, come join us. That's how to do it right there. For those of you who are on Locals or Rumble, we've got Locals and Rumble content and channels going now as well. So we'd love to see you there. Come on over. Going to skip over that. You know about the book. If you don't, we've got a book out there that talks about if you think, here's the core piece on the book. If you think that, hey, doc, my brother had a heart attack. I got a lot of his genes. Can we just do a stress test to make sure I'm okay? If you think that's going to make sure you're okay, you're already headed down the wrong path. And this book goes into, just like this channel, a lot of the science about why a stress test is not going to prevent or predict a heart attack. So the short form, the single slide deck for today before the major content is on the second of the 2 blockbuster groups of diabetes drugs, Farxiga, dapagliflozin. It's the SGLT2 inhibitors. These drugs actually impact diabetes by turning off the kidney's ability to pull sugar back into the blood. So when your blood sugar gets too high, your kidney filter will, it's called a glomerulus. Each kidney has about 1 million filters, and that glomerulus will spill sugar into your urine if the blood sugar goes too high. But as that continues to go down the collecting tubules in the kidney, those collecting tubules will pull that sugar back and put it back into the blood. The SGLT2s, which have continued to show great cardiovascular outcome trials evidence, stop that reuptake of blood sugar. That actually leads to the biggest concern about side effects. All these drugs have side effects. Especially prescription drugs have side effects. The side effects for the SGLT2s are infections, like manilial infections, like you see with babies with a wet diaper, that diaper rash. Now, let's go back and talk about, let me get back to the script and talk about the Farxiga news. It sounds good, but once you start getting into the details, it could be better. So the FDA has approved a new generic drug for dapagliflozin. It's called, or Farxiga. The new generic of the SGLT2 inhibitor is produced by Zydus Pharmaceuticals. The agency added 2 different dose formulations, 5 milligrams and 10 milligrams, to the approved drug products with therapeutic equivalence evaluations. However, the new formulation might not be available till 2025. So again, these prices are going to continue to stay high on both of these drug classes, the GLP-1s, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, and the SGLT2s. 2025, why might it be that long before we get some competition in that market? Because 2025 is when the AstraZeneca patent expires. Zydus failed in its bid to invalidate that patent in a district court hearing in 2021. So is that the only SGLT2? No, there are others. Canagliflozin, empagliflozin, ertugliflozin, just a bunch of different options out there. All of them, unfortunately, very expensive. Now, speaking of expensive, I just turned 65. So I qualified for Medicare here in the US, which meant I can get a lot of drugs for far less expense than I could just a month ago. I've been telling myself I was going to try the GLP-1s, one of the GLP-1s. And sure enough, I did try one of them. I tried Ozempic. We'll talk about my experience. It wasn't what I expected. We'll talk about that experience in a few minutes. But Gilbert, will you give us the water ball? So the drug, let's talk for a minute about the drug that I tried. It wasn't tirzepatide or Mounjaro. It's most commonly known as Ozempic. It's semaglutide. It's a GLP-1. Other names for Ozempic, Rybelsus is the oral preparation. You might have heard of it as Wegovy, the weight loss medication. Again, the GLP-1s, and this is the most common one, the GLP-1s have been around for pushing 10 years now. They're actually looking to lose their patents in another 18 months or so. We've reported on that. So at first, I didn't actually have to use my my new Medicare benefit. Although I found out that I found out that my copay was far more affordable than I expected. It was $45 a month. These drugs are about $1,000 per month still if you pay full price. Why is Medicare now offering cost-effective options for these drugs and for the SGLT2s like Farxiga? The SGLT2s, like Farxiga, like we talked about a minute ago, those are $750 a month. But again, both of them now have very cost-effective options available through Medicare and other insurance programs. Why? Because of the CVOT trials. What is CVOT trials? Well, here's the thing. It stands for cardiovascular outcome trials. One thing we have learned as a society, as a group, as a profession is that when we're trying new medications for diabetes, it's not so important how that medication impacts the diabetes as it is how it impacts cardiovascular outcomes. The diabetes isn't what kills us, it's the cardiovascular outcomes from the diabetes. So if a drug actually impacts cardiovascular outcomes, that's when it becomes, when insurance companies start paying for it. That's why you're seeing the GLP-1s like Ozempic and the SGLT2s like Farxiga getting paid for. So, what was my own experience with Ozempic? Well, as I mentioned, I didn't even have to go through Medicare for my first dose. We had some samples down at one of my clinics, so I got a sample. The sample lasts for a month, by the way, and a couple of things happened that I did expect that weren't a surprise. For example, the biggest issue was my blood sugar pattern didn't really change that much. When I eat, it'll still go up about 20 points. And my lowest part of the day is like between 2 and 4 a.m. in the morning. That's very common. That's what we see with most folks that are, have diabetes like myself, but just aren't eating carbs. Here's what was interesting though. The entire average dropped 20 to 30 points. So routinely, my blood sugar will, off of Ozempic, off of a GLP-1, will hang around 90 to 100, and then it'll spike up to 120 after eating. Here's what happened this time on Ozempic. It was routinely hanging in the 60s. And it would spike up to the 90s, maybe to 100. So it was 60s and 70s, and then spike up to 100, and then back down. Now, you begin to see why and how that happens. We'll talk for a few minutes about how that happens a little bit later, but let me share the rest of my experience before we go there. I wasn't surprised to see the significant decrease in average blood sugars. That's what the GLP-1s are doing, and that's how they're having their impact. The next thing that happened, I was also not surprised about, except as a clinician, as a doctor who deals with this all day, every day, I wasn't surprised to see it happen, but as a human, as a patient, it was a weird feeling. For the first time that I can remember, the first time in decades, I'm not always hungry. Always hungry, I put it in our notes and I put it in caps because Always Hungry is the title of a book by David Ludwig. David Ludwig is an endocrinologist and the head of the weight loss center at Harvard. He's got some great books on diabetes, prediabetes, and explaining how to manage that. The title of his foremost book in this area is Always Hungry. And here's what happens. You classically see it with those of us that get prediabetes and diabetes. We get changes in some key hormones in our body. One of them is ghrelin, the hunger hormone. Another one is leptin, sort of the anti-hunger hormone. And yes, we get problems with insulin and some other things. If you have more interest in that hormone, the hormones associated with hunger, I recommend that book. It's a great book. He gets into ghrelin and leptin, and for sure he gets into insulin. But the thing that the hormones that we're going to talk about today, he really doesn't touch on very much. In fact, you don't hear a whole lot about them. They're called incretins. Again, we'll talk about those in just a few minutes. But before we do, I want to share the third major change or experience that I had when I tried Ozempic, the GLP-1. So, as you might imagine, I've been on it 3 weeks now, and I've lost 10 pounds. So yes, it's had a big impact. I do things to manage my lifestyle. So you put an appropriate lifestyle with an appropriate medication, and it tends to have a significant impact. To that point, I'll digress just a second further and say, one of the reasons that I get beat up for talking about medications is that so many people use medications as a crutch. When you do what I do for a living, that's one of the things that I hate about my world, and that is a lot of people use metformin as a crutch instead of changing their lifestyle. A lot of people use statins as a crutch instead of changing their lifestyles. And it's crystal clear that a lot of people are going to use these medications as a crutch instead of doing what they need to do with their lifestyle. And again, that's a frustration. In fact, in my experience, I can tell you more people are going to just depend on any drug that's available than are going to actually do the work. I can tell you it's been a wonderful experience seeing patients coming for this channel, because that's not the case with the viewers that we have here. I keep pushing down the line on my own experience. Here's the thing that I didn't expect. It caught me totally sideways. It was sleep. I've had better sleep since I've been on Ozempic, my Ozempic trial, than I've had in 40 years. I even sleepwalked one night. I was a sleepwalker as a teenager. There was more than one time that I woke up in my front yard. So a lot of people, they hear about sleepwalking and they get really nervous. You know, I'm used to it, or at least I was used to it when I was younger. Haven't had it since then. But now it's like I'm sleeping like I did when I was a teenager. I went back and started looking some things up about sleep and the GLP-1 hormones, to be discussed later on. But again, it's been a very, very interesting experience. So now that I've covered my experience on a GLP-1, let's switch for a second and talk about this new weight loss drug, this new diabetes drug that actually beat Ozempic in terms of performance. It's called tirzepatide. And as I mentioned, a lot of people have been asking about it. The brand name is Mounjaro. And let's get back into the script. This first article was from a journal called Molecular Metabolism, 2020 in Canada. Tirzepatide is a dual glucose-dependent insulinotropic polypeptide. What? It's a GIP, GIP. Just leave it at that. Don't try to remember the rest of it. But here's the part. It's a GIP and GLP-1 agonist. So in other words, GLP-1 agonists are called incretins. What is an incretin? I said we were going to talk about that a few minutes ago. We talked about a lot of the other hormones associated with glucose metabolism and with hunger. And I mentioned the book, Always Hungry, is covering a lot of those. And I said there's some other hormones that are also very important that just don't get a lot of coverage there. We will cover them a few times as we cover our content in this space, because it's important to know. Decades ago, there was a discovery of hormones that were actually created by the intestines. So what happens is the stomach dumps food contents that have been mixed by the stomach and mixed with acid into the intestine. As a result of getting that dump of food from the stomach, the intestines release some hormones. One of those hormones is GLP-1. Another of those hormones is GIP. So what do those hormones do? One of the things that they do, and you'll see this with the GLP-1 side effects, and you'll also see it with Mounjaro or tirzepatide, decreased gastric emptying. So your stomach feels full. Again, I never had that feeling until I tried this, and it was, again, a weird feeling. I expected it, but it still felt weird. So the intestines will tell the stomach, okay, we've got enough food to work with here. Don't empty any more on us. incretins do a couple of other things as well. They go to those incretins go to the pancreas and they say, we've got some food coming through. You're going to get a load of glucose into the bloodstream from us. So you better release more insulin. So it causes more insulin release. And as I said before, there's some things about things like sleep that we just don't understand yet about these incretins. As I started looking at sleep and incretins, by the way, I also saw some research that's been done looking at other addictions. When I'm referring to food addictions here, I'm talking looking at other addictions such as cigarette smoking, alcohol addiction, and coke addiction. That sounds like a weird thing, but yes, there are trials going on right now looking at GLP-1s, the incretins, and their impact on the reward centers associated with other addictions besides food. What's going to come of that? I don't know. It's just I'm sharing with you some of the discovery that I'm having as I go through some of these activities. Now, what does tirzepatide do? Let's get back to the script. Tirzepatide has effects on weight loss, insulin secretion, increased diuresis or peeing out. It decreases gastric emptying. So these are the three big ones immediately, or short term: weight loss, insulin secretion, and decreased gastric emptying. The biggest issue and the reason for the interest in these for people like me in cardiovascular prevention is the last item: long-term cardiovascular protection. Now, let's look at another trial. This was in The Lancet, 2021. The data came out of the US, Japan, and Mexico. The SURPASS-1 trial, tirzepatide and type 2 diabetes. It was a phase 3 trial that included 705 individuals. Tirzepatide 5, 10, and 15 milligrams was compared to placebo. So, and again, tirzepatide has a brand name of Mounjaro. Tirzepatide was superior to placebo in decreasing hemoglobin A1C, fasting glucose, self-monitored glucose levels during the day, as well as body weight after 40 weeks. SURPASS-2 trial. This was in the New England Journal in 2021, with data coming from the UK, United States, and Argentina. 1,879 patients were included. Tirzepatide or Mounjaro was compared to semaglutide, Ozempic, Rybelsus, Wegovy for type 2 diabetes control. After 40 weeks, tirzepatide, pardon the typos, tirzepatide decreased hemoglobin A1C more effectively than semaglutide. Let me repeat that. So semaglutide, which is coming out of the blocks with huge improvements in cardiovascular outcomes, improvements in A1C, improvements in blood sugar levels, improvements in body weight. Tirzepatide aced semaglutide or Ozempic in all of those areas. It increased weight loss, lower fasting glucose levels, again, compared to the simple GLP-1. And again, the point behind that is, the assumption is that it's the addition of the other incretin. So you've got a twin incretin mechanism as opposed to just a GLP-1 or incretin mechanism. Now, SURMOUNT-1 trial, 2539 adults were included, 2,539. Tirzepatide given once weekly was compared to placebo for 72 weeks for weight loss. 85% of patients showed at least 5% body weight loss. And here's the number that knocks you out. Over half of those people lost up to 20% of the body weight with tirzepatide. Now, these are not people that are necessarily doing lifestyle changes. They're just taking a shot once a week, a simple, easy shot once a week with a tiny needle that's smaller than a Libre needle. And they're going about their day saying, I hope this is going to fix it. And sure enough, it's having a huge impact. You know, for a 200-pound person, a 20% body weight loss is 40 pounds. For a 160-pound person, it's 32 pounds. These are big weight losses. So again, you can go back and you say, wait a minute, this just sounds ooky. This is a drug that's very effective at causing weight loss. Brewer, you're selling us out. You need to go to lifestyle maintenance. As I've said before, I'm going with the science, with what's there. And when you do what I do in terms of managing cardiovascular risk, you know that managing body fat is managing cardiovascular risk. So that's the content, the prepped content for today. Gilbert, if you will give us the Q&A, we'll go into the Q&A discussion. So let's go. I got on a little bit early today and gave some prep. I felt like we didn't get a great title coming out. We should have clarified that this was tirzepatide. It's that weight loss, diabetes, blockbuster drug that's coming out that everybody's asking about, rather than just saying a new diabetes drug. So we got some information out. Let me go down the list here. Paisley. Good morning, Dr. Brewer. Love your channel. Thank you so much, Paisley. I appreciate that. Thumbs up. My doctor is big on weight loss and metformin and these kind of drugs. I've got a lot of people on metformin. And the question is it weight loss or is it prediabetes management, diabetes management? We've already covered that a couple of times. If you have, go ahead and hit me up on that if you have further questions about whether it's weight loss or prediabetes management. Paisley, he put me on metformin for weight loss. So John Tuccio, good morning, Dr. Brewer. Good morning to you, John. And I did comment, I've got a lot of people on metformin. Is it prediabetes or is it weight loss? Okay. Margaret D, good morning. I will catch you on the reply today. Carry on with the good work. Thank you so much, Margaret D. I look forward to hearing from you again. Shaw Yar, good morning. Good morning, Shaw. How are you? Bart Robinson, good morning, everyone from a hot and humid Salem County, New Jersey. Yeah, it's getting that time of the year, isn't it? I love that time of the year. I'm from South Carolina and love the hot, muggy, sweaty days of late summer. Paisley, my metformin is to manage slightly elevated insulin levels, preventing me to lose weight. So you bring up a good point, Paisley. I'm glad you did. Gives me, these questions give me an opportunity to go down bunny holes. You remember I mentioned the topic "Always Hungry" of Dr. David Ludwig's book, the guy that manages, the endocrinologist that manages the weight loss program at Harvard. He called it "Always Hungry" because he said, look, when you start getting insulin resistant, your insulin starts creeping up. When you get hungry, you get even a bigger hit of insulin. That drops your blood sugar. And this roller coaster of blood sugar, but you get hungry when your blood sugar starts diving like that. So when you're getting into a mode where you're insulin resistant, and your insulin is starting to do this, you start dealing with hunger. And as we mentioned before, it's not just insulin. Dr. Ludwig describes this process very, very well in his book, Always Hungry. But as I also said, it's a little bit more complicated than insulin. He does talk about ghrelin. He does talk about leptin, which are very important hormones in this hunger process. But he doesn't get quite so deep in the incretins. That's what we covered today. And those are a big deal in this issue of us with prediabetes getting always hungry. You know, the term always hungry and the point that you brought up, Paisley, actually gets to a related issue. Richard Taubes, who's been at the forefront of the low carb diet craze or diet recommendations or whatever you want to call that, has made an excellent point. It took him 750 pages to make it, but he still made it very, very well. He said, most people think that middle-aged folks are getting heavy because we're eating more. That's not really what's going on. We're eating more because we're getting heavy. And we're getting heavy because of our insulin resistance. Now, what did he mean by that? I'm going to assume you followed me all the way to that last point, because there's something else that we haven't mentioned. Elevated insulin stops our body from burning fats. So teenagers, you know, I know there's an obesity epidemic even among teenagers now, but your typical skinny young teenager, our generation when we were teenagers tended to be skinny. We were not resistant to insulin at that point in time. We did not have high levels of insulin all day, every day. We did not have high levels of insulin in the morning, even fasting insulin, like we do now as boomers. So what happens if your insulin is elevated like that? I mean, it may be going up and down a little bit, but overall, it's much higher than it was when you're a teenager. Well, these high insulin levels stop our body from burning fat. And again, I'm not going to go down this next bunny hole, but I'll mention it. I've had several videos where I describe triglyceride over HDL and how triglycerides are a function, and HDL is a function as well, of our carb metabolism and how high our insulin happens to be. It's because if our insulin is up all the time because we're insulin resistant, we're not pulling that blood sugar down. So our body's saying, here, put more and more insulin out there. Keep it out there. Keep banging at those resistant insulin receptors until you get that blood sugar down. When that insulin remains so high for so long, it shuts off our ability to burn fat. So instead of when we were teenagers burning fat very well, as baby boomers, we lose the ability to burn fat. So Richard Taubes picks up there and says, we get insulin resistant. Our insulin cranks up higher and higher. We lose our ability to burn fat like we did when we were teenagers. When we do that, we start adding the fat onto our bodies. And guess what? If we're not able to burn fat, we got to burn something, so we get hungry. So we start eating. And again, that's what takes us down that carb pathway. Okay, Paisley. So my doctor put me on metformin to lose weight, boost my metabolism. Ada Reeves, good morning. Bambi Grage, good morning, Bambi. Good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Paisley, first doc to look into it for me. Aura Ruth. You know, Aura picked up something with me. I've been under a lot of pressure the past couple of years building the Alabama project. And Aura said, Ford, have you gained some weight? Yes, I had. I had gotten up to close to 180. It depends on what scales you're looking at. My scales at home never said over 170. But the scales at the new clinic where I went said, yeah, 180. Now, I was continuing to work out. I was continuing to keep a low waist size. It's still, I mean, it got up to 33. I never got below 33 until my 60s when I went on a low carb diet. Even though I was lighter in the past, I still had a 33 waist. I was getting up to, again, 170, 180, just overeating, too many dinner meetings, too much stress, too much ceremonial eating, and too much, at the end of the day, food addiction from my youth. So, as I said about my experience on Ozempic, in 3 weeks, I've lost 10 pounds. I had 10 pounds to lose. This discussion about gaining weight, even though you have a smaller waist size, is a big deal. It's a far bigger deal than people think about, especially for baby boomers, because one of the things that you begin to realize as you look at the science is that loss of muscle mass is a big deal for cardiovascular inflammation, cardiovascular risk. So I have a lot of patients who get really focused on that and say, I don't want to lose too much weight. I don't want to lose muscle mass. I'm not going to go any further on that discussion yet, other than to say sometimes we need to be less fearful of losing muscle mass if we're continuing to improve the strength and metabolic activity of those muscles. I'm going to have a friend and patient join us in a few weeks. And he's done a lot of weightlifting. He and I had this discussion a lot. And we're going to talk about a fellow, which you can find on the internet. His name is Richard the Ant Hawthorne. He's known as the Ant because he's got multiple world records for lifting multiples of his own weight, just like an ant. And an example is a 130-pound guy doing multiple deadlifts, 610 up to 650 pounds. So again, you don't have to have these giant muscles to have very effective, strong, and metabolically active, healthy muscles. So we'll get to that discussion a little bit later. But again, Ora Ruth, thank you for, I didn't even read your comment. Hello from my side of the world. Very weak, but better. Looking forward to exercising again. Gosh, did you tell us you had, was it a COVID problem you had? I'm glad to hear you're feeling better, and I'm glad you're getting out there to exercise for the reasons that I just discussed. Bobby Ocampo, RX Wiki TV says that Viagra has been tested to improve insulin sensitivity and reduce microalbumin, probably microalbumin creatinine ratio. So, but did not mention dose of sildenafil. I haven't seen that yet. I'm not completely surprised, but it's an interesting point, Bobby. Thank you so much for sharing. Mabuhay, God bless you for saving lives. And thank you, Bobby, and God bless you. Mabuhay to you as well. Jesus, Doc, what can we do about MTHFR mutations? So MTHFR is something that a lot of people are not aware of. It stands for a very long technical term, methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase. Don't try to remember that word. Just remember MTHFR. Here's what the reductase is, an important thing to remember about it, though, because here's what that has to do with oxidation. Has anybody ever heard of the term antioxidants, as in vitamins A, C, and E? It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry now. And that's because we know that oxidation is driving cardiovascular inflammation. So we try to take these supplements that can help us with oxidation, antioxidants. That's why they're called that. But here's the thing, the body can always do something better. And if the body's got a mechanism for doing something, use that mechanism. That's what MTHFR is all about. It is the body's way of accomplishing antioxidation. Genetically, over half of us have some challenges in the MTHFR gene. And so what do you do about it? I'm going to cut to the punchline and so we can get to another topic. But the very simple thing is, yes, you can get genetically tested. As you know, I used to work for a human genetics lab. And yes, I do have negative or bad MTHFR genes. I'm a poor methylator. You can look that up on the internet. You'll see a lot of stuff on it. Poor methylation or MTHFR. Here's what to do. You don't even have to get the test if you don't want to. If you have some elevations like homocysteine, just go ahead and get methylated B vitamin complex. And we've covered the science behind that before. If there are other questions about it, we can cover those again. Thank you, Jesus. Shayar, best diet, BBE lifestyle. BBBE. I don't know what BBBE is, Shah. Fort Worth West Side. How does taking larger doses of statin increase your risk of getting diabetes? Statin does push you along that diabetes highway. So now there's one statin, Fort Worth, that doesn't do that. That's called pitavastatin. The generic name is Pivasta. And there is another generic that's available. That Pivasta usually comes from a generic program in India. There's another group, you might not be able to read it, Marley Drug here in the US, that has what's called a biological generic. It's called Zypitamag. Livalo is the brand name. It's expensive. It's still under patent, and they know that it's expensive because it's the kinder, gentler statin, and it doesn't cause this problem of increasing insulin resistance. Now, what do I take? I've taken that some, but I'm back on simple, easy, low-dose Crestor or rosuvastatin, because the 5 milligrams or less per day does not have a significant impact on insulin resistance. Great question. Thank you so much, Fort Worth West Side. I hope that provided the clarity you were looking for. Big Fat Tuna. Hello. How are you, Big Fat Tuna? Bart Robinson. Get well, Aura Ruth. I agree. Thank you, Bart. Aura Ruth. I started following you because you brought in the science and knew how to take apart a paper. A rare quality in a doc. Thank you, Aura Ruth. You're right. So I will just make a comment about that. As you see, yes, I'm into prevention. My cardiovascular prevention is my passion, my space, because that's what's killing and disabling us. Well, I used to work at Johns Hopkins. I was faculty there. And besides teaching, my role was to work as what's called an epidemiologist. I worked as an epidemiologist for the state government. I did some work for the federal government as well. What is an epidemiologist? It's not a skin doctor. That's a dermatologist. Epidemiologist, the term epidemiologist is built on the root word epidemics. Basically, what we're doing is something different. Instead of looking at all the diseases in one person at a time, an epidemiologist looks at all the people that have one disease and look at that population impact of that disease, an epidemic. Now, what has that got to do with reading papers? Well, in order to understand the risk factors and the transmission of diseases, you have to understand a lot of math. You have to get way deep into statistics. And I did take some doctoral level probability classes, for example. I enjoyed those, but they were very hard. So epidemiologists actually look at, okay, was this a bias? Was this a participation bias? Was this something that the research team didn't really think about? And there is no perfect study. Every study has problems. And the point that I wanted to bring to the internet was, I said, I don't know for sure, but I suspect a lot of people may really enjoy hearing the science behind cardiovascular prevention. So that's what this channel is all about. Thank you so much, Aura Ruth, for mentioning that. Decap, how do you prevent weight loss being on metformin? I'm already so thin. A1C is at 6.2 now. Kept losing weight, frustrating. That is a challenging problem. You're not the only person. There's a lot of folks who, again, we've mentioned this so many times. So many of the good diabetes medicines also cause weight loss. For the majority of us, that's a good thing, because so many of us have food addiction problems. We eat too much, and a lot of that's based on the biology. But not all of us, Dee. You represent that small minority where you're already thin, but you still have diabetes or prediabetes. That's a major challenge. Like everything else in terms of cardiovascular prevention, a lot of this boils down to discipline. And what kind of discipline am I talking about? I hate to say it, but it's the truth. It's what I deal with. My patients that have that problem have to figure out, okay, how can I get more calories in? Most of the time, it's looking for sources of fats and oils, healthy fats, healthy oils that they maybe don't like so much, but they know they got to do it. Like, I've got one of the more popular countermeasures to the problem you described, Dee, is just taking several tablespoons of olive oil or avocado oil straight. Just take them, say, I know I got to do that, and this is in addition to the food that I'm going to be eating. That's sort of like, you get the picture of the old timey Little Rascals, or some of the cartoons where they were making kids take castor oil. Yeah, it's the taste you hate once a day. Great question. Thank you so much for bringing that up, Dee. Ball, who makes money from stress tests? Good question. Actually, in that book about how a stress test can't predict your heart attack, I go into some gory detail that's already, again, I don't make it up. I'm just reporting what's already been out there in the New York Times and some other places about the major impact of finance. It's called the medical industrial complex. Back in the days of Eisenhower, post-World War II, they coined the economists coined a term, the military industrial complex. More recently, the use of the term medical industrial complex has been a big, big deal. And there's no question that finances continue to drive a lot of tests and procedures that just don't work. Speaking of tests and procedures that don't work, I'm going to have a guest soon. He was on Ken Berry's podcast recently. He's coming to mind, but it's going to be a different kind of interview. His name is Philip Odavia, Odavia. He's a cardiothoracic surgeon. He wrote a book called "Stay Off My Operating Table." Ivy League trained cardiothoracic surgeon, and now on the side, he's doing what I do, teaching people lifestyle and cardiovascular prevention. Now, what was interesting, and some of what's going to be different about my interview with Phil, with Dr. Avadia, we're going to talk a lot about his personal life. He was obese at one point, a cardiothoracic surgeon trying to replace heart vessels that were clogged up with diabetes, who had his own problem with obesity. He went keto, dropped his carbs, lost tons of weight. So you know what? Like me, I think he had a little bit of a food addiction issue there, and he and I are going to discuss that when he joins us. He's also been very clear. His perspective is, and he said it, the medical community really needs to apologize to our patient population for so many of the things that we've done to them that didn't help. And he's referring to stents. So I thought, oh, that is so interesting. A cardiovascular surgeon saying stents don't help. You know, he's talking about the Courage trial. He's talking about the Orbita trial. They showed, I've reported on those many, many times. Those things don't help. And he wasn't even talking about stress tests like M. Ball just brought up. So as I'm listening to that podcast, I'm wondering, okay, he's a cardiothoracic surgeon. The Orbita trial and the Courage trial showed that stents didn't help. So most doctors said, okay, well, it's got to be a bypass. That's the only thing that's going to help. And guess what? There was another study. I've reported on it many times. It's called the ischemia trial. The ischemia trial showed that, except for some very circumscribed situations, bypass doesn't help either. So I was waiting for him to see if he actually said that. And he did. To his credit, he said, my bread and butter, you know, what I do, that doesn't help most people either. So I can't wait to have Dr. Avadia on the show. Stay tuned. I think it's going to be like August 4. I think that was the day he requested. Thanks, M. Ball. Great question. Let's go to the next one. Bobby Ocampo. Can SGLT2 inhibitors also help fatty liver? Anything that helps diabetes can help fatty liver. There was an interesting statistic that happened a couple of years ago. For the first time ever, more cirrhosis was being caused by fatty liver, which is a prediabetes issue, than was being caused by alcohol. So big fat tuna, there's another new drug called tirzepatide. Are you familiar with this? Big fat tuna, are you kidding or what? I mean, that's what the content was on about today. I hope you're kidding. That's what our content was on. And yes, I've got patients on it. And yes, it appears to be having a much bigger impact than even the GLP ones. M. Ball, eat more sugar, take a drug. That's the way to go. Unfortunately, more people are going to do that than the right thing. Thank you, M. Ball. And I'll just say this again. I know that nobody else, none of our viewers has this problem, but in my world, there's a lot of things that I really don't like. That's one of them. More people will eat more sugar and take a drug than will actually do the right thing. Pardon me if that's repetitive. Big fat tuna, Mounjaro, tirzepatide. It's an injection medicine. Tuna, are you bombing us, or did you not listen, or what's going on? John Tacho, were you able to pay less for your Medicare with Medicare? Oh, yes. So as I mentioned, John, you may not have heard it. We set up, I went straight Medicare for now. I'm going to go Medicare Advantage later. But we set up my Medicare or Medigap coverage specifically so I could try these medications. And yes, I've checked on my copay. It's $45. Very much more affordable, less than a tenth of the price. Bob Bell, Jardiance, concerned about Fournier's gangrene. So the most common issue associated with Jardiance and the SGLT2 inhibitors is what I mentioned before. Infections due to increased sugar in the urine. Thank you, Bob. Big Fat Tuna, I'm currently on Ozempic. My insurance wouldn't cover Wegovy, but will cover Mounjaro. I plan on talking to me doc about switching. Very interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Big Fat Tuna. Bobby Ocampo, have a vacation in the Philippines and buy your 2 years supply of dapagliflozin for only approximately $1,200 US compared to your Farxiga. We welcome you here in the Philippines. You know what? Yet another reason for medical tourism. And don't get me started on my frustrations with the FDA and Big Pharma and you name it. Thank you so much, Bobby. Ora Ruth, can see the weight loss best on your face. You look like you did 4 years ago. Ora, you're a good observer. Thank you so much. Lucian P, we need to get on that stuff. Sleep is a huge problem for me. Oh, gosh. It's a huge problem for me. What I have, Lucian, is a thing called early morning awakening. For the longest time, look it up, Wikipedia, or EMA, early morning, or Google it, early morning awakening. You go to sleep okay, but you wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning and you can't go back to sleep. Hopefully, if you're lucky, you'll get another hour of sleep before you wake up at 7 or 8. If you don't, it's a rough day. And again, I had some sleep challenges last night, which more associated with I'm not going to go there. Well, I will. So more associated with challenges associated with the Alabama project. Even though I got very little sleep, it was such effective sleep. It was like I'm living in a different world in terms of sleep than I've lived in since I was a teenager. I don't hear that all the time from patients. I don't know how reliable that's going to be for folks. I'm just sharing. I'm taking off my doctor hat and sharing my patient experience hat. Lucian P, what's that mean? Not sure what that means. Ada Reeves, what part of Medicare covers Ozempic? I thought you need to have a supplemental insurance to cover RXs. That's exactly what I was just discussing, Ada. It was my Medigap coverage plan. Big Fat Tuna, Mounjaro will typically cost around $975 for 4 weeks of treatment. Yes, it will. These are very expensive drugs. And that's one of the reasons that I've personally not covered them so much. What happened was the CVOT trials, the cardiovascular outcome trials, continued to pile up, showing the effectiveness of these drugs for cardiovascular prevention. I mean, that's what this channel's about. That's what I do. So that increased again my curiosity and my focus in the space. Maybe was it you, Big Fat Tuna, that mentioned insurance companies are starting to cover it? Yes, it's expensive, but they're starting to cover it. And it's because as an insurance company, you can't not cover something that has such positive impacts on cardiovascular outcome trials. Guys, hold on just a second. I have a meeting. I've got another half hour, and then we've got at least that many questions. So let's see if we can pick up the pace. Do you have any concerns with thyroid cancer as a rare side effect of GLP-1? Absolutely, Bob. The number one contraindication for GLP-1s is thyroid cancer. As I said earlier, every one of these, every prescription drug, you can pretty much will usually have at least one very serious outcome. With other diabetes drugs, for example, I'm having them. Oh gosh, I'll cover it later. It's Actos. Somebody give me give me the technical name for it. I'm blanking on it right now. Actos was a great diabetes drug, came out of the blocks. It was being used a lot. It's the only drug that actually works on the insulin receptor itself, but it was found to cause bladder cancer. So you look at every one of these drugs. GLP-1s associated with thyroid cancer, also associated with another type of adenoma, MEN, multiple endocrine adenoma. And it's probably because it stimulates endocrine glands. So, Doc, you're talking about poisons. They hurt us. They kill us. Yep. Diabetes. You shouldn't be taking these. You shouldn't be taking these unless you already have a life-threatening issue. A thing that's actually more life-threatening than these. And again, I think it was the great Pogo once said, look, you pay your money, you take your licks. Now, I cannot have that conversation without mentioning another argument I have with the FDA. I think the FDA ought to take metformin off of the prescription list. It does not have the kind of serious side effects that you see with GLP-1s, SGLT2s, pioglitazone, which is the Actos I was trying to remember. You just don't see those kind of things with metformin. It ought to be like aspirin. In fact, aspirin has more dangerous side effects than pioglitazone. I mean, not pioglitazone, metformin. Aspirin has more serious side effects than metformin. So again, go back. Don't take any of these drugs if you don't need them. Bobby Ocampo, if tirzepatide increases insulin, does it worsen insulin resistance? No, it does not. That is an interesting question. You would think, well, if you're constantly getting more insulin put out there, then you must be increasing the resistance. I don't think we understand fully yet how that works, but we do know from enough experience, like I said, these, the GLP-1s, not tirzepatide yet, it's still new, but the GLP-1s don't increase insulin resistance. So still more to learn about these medications. Dr. Ben Bickman is recommending low insulin to improve insulin sensitivity. I'm aware of that, and it certainly makes sense. Drax of the North, would tirzepatide help reduce raised A1C levels caused by statins or niacins? Of course it would. Good question. Thank you for asking. Big Fat Tuna at Bob Bell. I heard that too. Again, I think talking about the thyroid cancer association with the GLP-1s. DCAP, I have an idiopathic gastroparesis that probably developed from SIBO, and my sugar stays up because food is fermenting in the gut. No hunger or overeating. The days my bowels move good, my sugar is okay. Interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. Shaw Yard, is it safe for people with third-degree kidney disease? Yes, that's a different issue. It can get a little bit more complicated. I'm not going to cover that today, but it's a good question. You need to talk to a doc before you take one of these medications for the reasons that we discussed. Tanner Bruin, do you need to be diagnosed type 2 before you can be prescribed these drugs? Usually before your insurance will pay for it. They will pay for these, the GLP-1s, like Ozempic. For most insurance companies will pay for Ozempic and the other GLP-1s for obesity as well. But if you don't have obesity, if you just have some prediabetes, most of them aren't going to agree to pay for it. Drax of the North, does the weight come back when you discontinue tirzepatide? That's not that clear yet. I suspect that it does. Perhaps a little bit more slowly, because perhaps with those 40 weeks, you've changed your food habits. There's no question about that. But does it totally reconfigure the food, the satiety hormones, the ghrelin, the incretins? No, it doesn't. Fred J. Marco, Doc, what do I have to do to consult with your group about my diabetes? My doctor wants to put me on insulin. I would, I would not. I would consider a lot of stuff before I went on insulin, but I want more info. So, Gilbert, can you put up Michelle's telephone number again? 859-721-1414. You can call Michelle at that number, Fred, or you can visit us on our website. I mean, just look up my name, look up the website. There's places there where you can figure out how to get in to see us. I'm licensed. I have current medical licenses in all 50 states of the United States. I can see you as a doc and prescribe medications, assuming you live here. For other countries, it's a slightly different issue, but not that different. I have patients in Israel, Brazil, Singapore, Thailand, Philippines, you name it. Tons of them in Australia and New Zealand. So we got patients everywhere. Decap, couldn't complete my earlier comment. Motility meds make me sick too. So kids stuck. Harvey Ops, tirzepatide weight loss. Any info regarding fat versus muscle loss? No, I did not see info in that area. I will tell you this, given the mechanisms, they're more weight, the mechanisms are more directed towards loss of body fat. But like any kind of weight loss, you have to continue to stimulate muscle, to stress those muscles, work them out, push them in order to maintain muscle mass and muscle strength and muscle function, especially when you're in a weight loss mode, no matter what is the cause of the weight loss. Decap, motility meds make me sick, kind of stuck. Drax of the North, how does tirzepatide compare to a clean ketogenic lifestyle? So, that's a really good question, and we've touched on it a couple of times. Is this an either or? If it's an either or, ketogenic lifestyle, do that in a heartbeat. It's like, why would you take a medication for something that you can fix completely with a lifestyle change? Is it that important to eat carbs? Of course it's not. So again, I don't see these as if this is an either or, I think the answer to the question should be very, very obvious. Ketogenic lifestyle is much safer. It's much less expensive. Stick with it. If it will keep you off of tirzepatide, do it. These are drugs. These are not, and they're prescription drugs. Somebody mentioned a few minutes ago. Bob Bell mentioned a few minutes ago. These things are associated with cancer. They still cause fewer deaths than than diabetes that folks are struggling with. But if you can manage your diabetes with lifestyle alone, don't go to drugs. Don't do it. Okay, so Lucian P, fat or muscle loss is a big deal because metformin causes muscle loss. Lucian, I would like to see some references on that. I know that's a very common perspective. I know, and I've seen a lot of the science around it. And I will say this, to your point, there is some scientific support for it. There's no question. But unless you're like a regional level athlete or Olympic level, and I've had a few of those, metformin, you really need to have a discussion about, okay, is the perceived decrease in muscle loss from metformin, is that not something I can overcome? Again, it's like everything else when we start looking at these things, lifestyle versus medication. And again, I would not recommend metformin for someone who can manage this without it. Bobby Ocampo, one internet video said that walking after a meal has a better effect than metformin. Have you done it, Bobby? I think anybody that hasn't done it should try it. There's no question. Taking a walk after every meal, and especially, number one, getting the excess carbs out of your meals has more of an impact than metformin. And let me go back and let me just quote a study. This was like 10 years ago in the New England Journal. It was a very simple head-to-head comparison. Lifestyle versus medication. And lifestyle was very simple, very easy. It was like there was some weight loss, but it was on the order of 5 pounds. It wasn't huge. Those lifestyle and some walking kind of exercise, not anything significant or aggressive. Those lifestyle changes were 3 times, not twice, 3 times more effective than metformin and no lifestyle changes. So again, as you can see, we're all hovering around this theme of medications versus lifestyle. And I think we're all preaching to the choir here. The folks that watch this channel know lifestyle, hands down, is the issue. We also all know that, unfortunately, that's not the case for most people. And when you do what I do for a living, that's frustrating. So, Steve Sapel Steve. Hi, Doc. Off topic. Any news on the Omicron B4, B5 variants of COVID? Should people have had that have had all the vaccines be concerned? I am not that deep into it. I will make a couple of comments about what I have seen. Number one, there's been evidence that there's been as much or more new infections with COVID recently than we've ever had. But there's been very few people, comparatively few people, ending up in the hospital. Now, what does that tell us? It tells us that most of us are just not getting as sick from COVID as we did the first time around. Is that from vaccination? Is that from previous exposure, previous infection? I think the answer to those questions is yes, it's from all of the above. And I think that's what you're seeing. Now, here's the next question. Are new upcoming variants going to, are we going to react the same to those? That remains to be seen. I think we have to cross that bridge when we come to it. Robert Weiss from the North Georgia Mountains. Good morning, Robert. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate seeing you here, and thanks for commenting. Bobby Ocampo, Dr. Eric Berg is recommending hyperbaric oxygen therapy. I have worked with a lot of people that recommend hyperbaric oxygen therapy for a lot of things. It clearly works appropriately for some things like the bends, the diver's disease. It clearly works for some things like burns. But hyperbaric oxygen is sort of like chelation. People get some ideas that they can use it for anything and everything, including atherosclerosis, plaque. And, they have their theories, but check in on the science before you start going down those pathways. Okay, Harvey Ops, Body by Science, Dr. Doug McGuff, ER Doc in South Carolina. Myokines, high intensity strength training, short time per week, slow movement, load under tension is key. You're talking about muscle performance and have no arguments with that. I will say this. If you read and study some of the world-class performers in bodybuilding and in weight training, in performance lifting, you'll hear a lot of the same things. You'll hear a lot of debate. Some of them say, don't tire yourself out with high reps. Just focus on low reps, major resistance. And that sounds like where you might be going. I will tell you, to me, the preponderance of the studies in that space would say you really do need both. You do need some low rep, incredibly high intensity stuff, which is what this sounds like this is, that group. But you also need the other end of the spectrum. You need to wear that muscle out. And that means, burning that glycogen out of that muscle so it realizes, yeah, we got to put more glycogen back to replace what we burned out. And that often has to do with high rep, low intensity. So, or time under tension, TUT. So, yeah, I'm very familiar with those debates. Like so many debates in science and in this world, politics and everything else, I tend to see so many places where both sides were right. It's like it's like that old Asian story that's an analogy of this issue. It was the 7 blind men and the elephant. One blind man was feeling the leg, and he said, "No, an elephant's like a tree trunk." Another one felt the elephant's tail, and he said, "No, the elephant's like a rope." Another one felt the elephant's side, and he said, "No, the elephant's like a big wall." Another one felt the tusk and said, "No, this thing is like a giant spear." Another blind man felt the elephant. You know where this is going. Another elephant felt blind man felt the elephant's trunk. And you know what he said? No, this is like a snake. This thing is wiggling all around. Which one of them was right? That's where this is going. Michael Sanders, hi, Doc from Arizona. How much omega-3 should an old guy be taking? Omega-3 is one of those continuing debates. Now, the folks that make, I'm blanking on the term, the more recent one, don't throw out your fish oil iodine. Sorry, I'm having a senior moment on the name of that stuff. Amarin. Is it Amarin? The Amarin folks that make omega-3 oil. So the omega-3 oils are, there are a couple of different kinds of omega-3 oil. Their perspective is one of those kinds is not as effective as another. And now my sleep loss is starting to show on me. I can't remember I'm blanking on the different types. I'll have to come back to that later. Bottom line is get a gram of, at least a gram, if you can, of omega-3 oils, and get the more common ones. Somebody help me out here in terms of my senior moment on the types. I'm going to have to finish up soon anyway to get to another meeting, but hopefully I don't have so many word finding problems on the next one. Sorry, Michael. Hopefully we can cover that again a little bit later. Robert Weiss, avoid quad bypass. It's still after quad bypass, it still gets rid of plaque, right? Well, again, I go back to the ischemia trial. If you're saying, look, a quad bypass actually works, go look at the studies of the ischemia trial, or listen to Phil Avadia, who does those, when he joins us on August 4th. After carbs, how long are carbs still carbs? To burn as carbs before they are turned to fat. Oh, well, see, that's an interesting point. So this may not be exactly what you're asking, but timing on carbs is a very, very interesting issue. People say, oh, no, you're talking about simple carbs, simple sugars. They're the problem, not complex carbohydrates. So eat complex carbohydrates, eat whole wheat bread. Look at the glycemic value of a whole wheat bread. It's almost as high as sugar. So, and I think both of them and white bread is like higher than sugar. So the point behind that is, quote, complex carbs take seconds to turn into sugar in your bloodstream. And sugar, I don't know how long it takes. Somebody Google search and help me out on that. How long does it take blood sugar to turn into fat? Lucian P, we're gonna have to move here quickly. Lucian P, walnut oil is better than olive oil. I'm not a big walnut oil. I haven't studied it a whole lot and can't answer that. Mezzanine, would you consider a GLP drug for a low carb, athletic, poor sleeper with recent fasting glucose of 107, but fasting insulin of 2.4? Trying to get my doc to prescribe a CGM, but he's resisting. Oh yeah, I would try both of them. I would consider both of those, a CGM like a Libre and a GLP-1. I mean, that's very similar to what I've got, a low carb, athletic, poor sleeper. And I told you about my experience. It's very interesting. Eric Berg is a goof. You said it. No comment. Quite often, I agree. Paisley, I'm in healthcare. I'm at the hospital now, sitting with a confused patient. Good luck with you and the confused patient. BTC, also, Doc, I recently added Zetia to my 5 milligrams Crestor. I listened to a podcast from the diet doctor. He stated this experience in his low-carb clients. My ApoB went from 100 to 40. Amazing. That is interesting. I heard about that. I haven't heard that specific diet doctor comment, but somebody else was telling me about that comment. I have not been a major fan of adding Zetia to Crestor, but am reconsidering based on that new information. Robert Weiss, friend just had quad bypass. Now the plan is getting rid of plaque and strengthening the cardio system, I think, or yeah, that's the usual plan. Do the surgery first and then start thinking about how to fix it. Lucian P, I can't go keto without electrolyte imbalance problems. It's not so easy to drop the carbs. If you heard me say, and if you heard me apply, and I've said and implied this a few times, just drop the carbs, I realize that's a headache. I get a lot of patients that come see me, and that's one of the things that it's a challenge. Many of them will say, well, I just decrease them. The reality is, at least once in your life, you need to do a fastidious, obsessive, compulsive look at the number of carbs you're eating and start just knocking them off one at a time. Make that change, hit the low-lying fruit, pardon the pun, stabilize, and then look at it again. I don't think I'm going to be able, no, I'm not going to be able to get to all the rest of the comments. A lot of interest today, a lot of comments. Shah-Yar, BBBE, beef, bacon, butter, and eggs. That is Dr. Berry advice to improve health. Yeah, no arguments there. A lot of people would be disappointed with me for not arguing with that. I'm more concerned about carbs. Lucian P, Mezzanine NutriSense offers a CGM without a prescription. Yes, I've heard that, and I keep planning to do a video on that. But we just got so many interesting topics to cover. Lucian, I would think, given how safe CGMs are, everyone should be able to get it over the counter. Lucian, I could not agree with you more. That's another one of my arguments with the FDA. So far, only NutriSense gives CGM to masses. I don't know how they got around the FDA requirement. Joseph Bates, why is there so much emphasis on taking a statin to reduce overall cholesterol versus addressing the root cause of reducing the damage, especially in light of all the functions of cholesterol, potential harms of this reduction? What are the best ways to measure that reduction of damage? Do we just look at the triglyceride over HDL ratio and insulin levels, or is there anything else we should be looking for? Joseph, thank you for asking that question. If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times, and you give me an opportunity to say it again. If you haven't had an OGTT, and even better, an insulin survey, look it up, Kraft Insulin Survey. It's an OGTT with insulin measurements. If you haven't had that, you need to have it. Guys, I've got another meeting in 1 minute. I appreciate the interest. And again, we still have tons of questions, and I'm not going to be able to get to all of them today. Thank you so much.